Now, Dr. Atkins says, I know of no evidence that the resurrection did take place. But there are actually 3 established facts recognized by the majority of New Testament historians today, which I believe are best explained by the resurrection of Jesus. Fact number 1, on the Sunday following his crucifixion, Jesus' tomb was discovered empty by a group of his women followers. According to Jakob Kramer, an Austrian scholar who has specialized in the study of the resurrection, by far, most scholars hold firmly to the reliability of the biblical statements about the empty tomb. Fact number 2, on separate occasions, different individuals and groups saw appearances of Jesus alive after his death. According to the prominent New Testament critic of Vanderbilt University, Gert Ludemann, it may be taken as historically certain that the disciples had experiences after Jesus' death in which Jesus appeared to them as the risen Christ. These appearances were witnessed not only by believers, but also by unbelievers, skeptics, and even enemies. Fact number 3, the original disciples suddenly came to believe in the resurrection of Jesus despite having every predisposition to the contrary. Luke Johnson, a New Testament scholar at Emory University, says, some sort of powerful, transformative experience is required to generate the sort of movement earliest Christianity was. N.T. Wright, an eminent British scholar, concludes, that is why, as an historian, I cannot explain the rise of early Christianity unless Jesus rose again, leaving an empty tomb behind him. There is no plausible naturalistic explanation of these 3 facts. Therefore, it seems to me, the Christian is amply justified in believing that Jesus rose from the dead and was who he claimed to be.
Dr. Craig, you believe that the testimony to the resurrection of Christ is something which is historically impossible or simply difficult to contradict?
I wouldn't say impossible. In matters of history, we don't talk in terms of absolutes, but I would say that there are those 3 established facts which...
They're not established facts. I'm sorry, they are repetitions of what is written in the Bible.
Well, insofar as you say that, Dr. Atkins, you disagree with the majority of New Testament historians who say that these facts do belong to the portrait of the historical Jesus.
But most of the historians of the New Testament are believers themselves and are desperate for it to be true, and they make it true by assertion.
I think that's a very naive view of New Testament criticism.
They certainly cannot prove that it is true.
Not in the sense of a mathematical proof, but in the sense of a historical proof.
Can we prove that Caesar was killed?
Well, exactly. It's the same sort of
proof
we're talking about.
It's not that there were real witnesses to Caesar's death. And on the day that it happened, there were no witnesses that
on the day that it happened,
on the day that Jesus purported to die.
Now, you're not denying that the crucifixion of Jesus was therefore a historical fact, are you?
It's quite likely he was crucified, at least someone was.
Yes, okay. And now, was he then buried by Joseph of Arimathea, as the Gospels report?
Well, that's what they wrote 80 years later, but I can't remember who buried my mother.
Uh-huh.
Well, maybe there was no reason to memorialize that burial.
I think it's important to understand that the New Testament critics who look at the New Testament are not, as you say, these biased believers desperate to believe in this. German New Testament criticism, which I have done my doctoral work in, is enormously skeptical and enormously influenced by the same anti-miraculous presuppositions that you evinced. And yet, the majority of critics today have found themselves driven to accept the facts of the empty tomb, the appearances of Jesus.
And the appearances of, there were 87,000 appearances of Elvis last year, weren't there?
What I don't think that...
Princess Di, I mean,
Yes.
she is going to be, Princess Diana is going to be the next person to be...
No, wait, but now are you admitting, though, now that they did have these experiences of appearances, but that they were hallucinations?
I can believe that there are two possibilities. One is that they were hallucinations, that they really so missed their leader that they were desperate to see him, and they just invented this sighting. The other is that it's just a straightforward lie.
You know of 12 people who are prepared to commit their lives to the apparition of Elvis, even to the point of suffering hideous deaths?
I think that if and I note your impartiality in this debate, it's very impressive.
Well,
I think that if I took 12 simple fishermen wandering around the banks of Galilee, I think that they would look for something that they could devote their lives to. No. These were simple
like
folk.
Paul. He wasn't one of the 12, but let me pick on you.
That's better. About time,
Craig.
with a real question, too.
Why, if everything you say is correct, doesn't the implicit logic of what you say totally command the academic community? Why is there so much skepticism if what you say is, to use his word, so manifestly correct?
Well, I never said it was manifestly correct. I think you can argue about any of these points, but I think that on balance, the premises are more plausible than their negations. Take the first argument that I gave. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. It seems to me that only a presuppositional antipathy toward theism would cause someone to reject those premises.
Well, this strikes you as extremely clear. Why doesn't it strike other people as extremely clear?
Well, as I say, I think some folks have an antipathy toward theism, like Dr. Atkins. I mean, it's so evident that he's got his mind made up when he said, what are the possibilities for explaining these resurrection appearances? The possibilities were lying or hallucinating. There wasn't even a possibility that they were telling the truth, that God really had done this. In other words, it's ruled out in advance.
Well, I think it's so unlikely that anything like that could happen that you have to look at the simpler explanations first. Go for the simpler explanation. Only if the simpler explanation fails and is explicitly shown to fail, go to the more complicated one.
I agree. I agree entirely with that.
And the breakdown of the laws of nature by the intrusion of the finger of God is not a simple way of proceeding.
That you're misusing the criterion of simplicity. That's not what simplicity means. It means don't multiply causes beyond necessity. And in this case, the hypothesis that these men were lying or were hallucinating is simply implausible, given their willingness to die for their beliefs, which shows sincerity, and given the un-Jewish nature of the belief that they came to hold, which couldn't have been the product of their own imaginations.
People go for a living death by throwing themselves into nunneries and into monasteries.
But they believe that it's true.
They believe it's true, but they're wasting their lives because of it.
But the point is that they really sincerely believe it. They're not lying. And that was the point that was being made here before.
So these 12 fishermen also believed it.
Okay, so you're willing to admit they weren't lying.
I can accept that if it is true, then it is possible that they were not lying.
Okay, so then
but these were simple-minded people. They were surrounded by miraculous events said to be going on. Maybe they just wanted to join in for the notoriety of being involved in amazing events. But there were people who were bored.
You think that
there wasn't much to do in Palestine at the time.
So they invented the resurrection of Jesus and endangered their lives because they were bored?
Well, no.